This story was sent in by a viewer named Leo. It happened a few years ago when he was renting an isolated, older house in a remote part of Vermont. The house was charming but aged, with original hardwood floors that were known to creak. Leo was used to the typical groans of an old building, but what happened that night was far beyond the house simply settling. It was a brutally cold, snowy night. Around 2 a.m., Leo was lying in his upstairs bedroom trying to drift off to sleep. Suddenly, a sharp sound erupted from the floor below. Creak, snap, creak. It was a distinct rhythmic sound, the unmistakable noise of someone walking very carefully across the wooden floorboards. Leo's first thought was of his cat, Oliver. He hoped Oliver was just knocking something over in the kitchen, but then he felt a weight shift beside him. He looked down and saw Oliver curled into a tight ball, fast asleep at the foot of his bed. A cold shiver raced down Leo's spine. He sat up, holding his breath, straining to hear. The sound became even clearer. Someone was coming up the stairs. Each step caused the old wood to groan under the weight of a heavy footfall. 1, 2, 3. The footsteps stopped exactly in front of his bedroom door. Leo stared at the door in the darkness, paralyzed. He waited for a knock, a voice, or some sign of who was there. Nothing. Silence filled the house. But then he noticed the faint glow of the hallway light through the gap at the bottom of the door being blocked. A long, unmoving shadow was cast onto his bedroom carpet. Leo slowly reached for his phone to call for help. As he tapped the screen, a notification popped up that made his blood run cold. It was an alert from his smart doorbell camera. The motion sensor had been triggered exactly 30 seconds ago, and the log showed that the front door had been opened from the inside.
This meant no one had broken in. Someone had already been inside the house the entire time, and they were now standing just inches away on the other side of his door. Suddenly, the doorknob began to turn. It was moving slowly, agonizingly quiet, as if whoever was out there was trying to enter without making a sound. Leo finally found his voice and screamed, "Who's there? I have a weapon!" There was no human reply. Instead, a distorted, mechanical-sounding voice, one that sounded exactly like Leo's own, whispered through the wood. "Don't be afraid, Leo. I just want to come inside."
Leo's heart was hammering against his ribs so hard it felt like it would burst. Hearing his own voice, not a recording, but a perfect, breathing imitation coming from the other side of the door was a level of terror he couldn't comprehend. He scrambled backward, his back hitting the cold glass of his bedroom window. "I'm calling the police!" Leo yelled, his voice cracking. He fumbled with his phone, his fingers shaking so violently he nearly dropped it. He managed to dial 911, but the voice from the hallway spoke again. "Leo, the police can't help you if they can't get in. Remember? You locked the deadbolt." The voice was calm, methodical. It was exactly the tone Leo used when he was talking to himself.
The doorknob continued to rattle, but then the sound changed. It wasn't the sound of someone trying to force the door open anymore. It was the sound of a key sliding into the lock. Leo stared in disbelief. He had his only set of house keys on his nightstand. He looked over. The keys were still there. Click. The door creaked open just an inch. A sliver of the dark hallway was visible. Leo held his breath, waiting for a monster or a masked killer to burst through. But nothing happened. The door just sat there, slightly ajar. Suddenly, Oliver, the cat, hissed. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at the floor near the foot of the bed. Leo followed the cat's gaze. From the darkness under his own bed, a hand reached out. It was a human hand, but the skin was unnaturally pale, almost blue from the cold. The fingers were long and thin, and they were clutching a small handheld recorder. Leo realized with a jolt of horror that the voice at the door had been a distraction. The person he heard on the stairs, the person who opened the front door from the inside, they had never left. They had been in the house for days, hiding, watching, and recording his every word to mimic him.
The figure began to crawl out from under the bed, moving with a jerky, disjointed motion. The person was wearing a tattered Vermont winter coat, their face obscured by long, matted hair. As they stood up, they didn't look at Leo. They looked at the slightly open bedroom door. The figure whispered into the recorder, and a second later, Leo's own voice echoed from the hallway again. "Leo, look behind you." The realization hit Leo like a physical blow. The intruder hadn't been outside the door. They had been inches away from his feet the entire time. As the figure stood up, Leo didn't wait to see their face. He lunged for the bedroom door, the one the intruder had left ajar as a trap. He sprinted past the empty hallway, his bare feet slapping against the cold wood. He didn't look back, but he could hear the disjointed, frantic scuffling of the person behind him. It sounded like someone trying to run on all fours. Leo reached the front door, tore it open, and ran out into the freezing Vermont night. He didn't stop until he reached his car. He locked the doors and sat there, chest heaving, staring at the house. He finally saw movement in his upstairs bedroom window. The figure was standing there, perfectly still, watching him. Then the bedroom light flickered off. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They searched every inch of the house with flashlights and canine units. They found the handheld recorder discarded on Leo's pillow. They also found a nest in the crawl space behind the bedroom wall, complete with food wrappers, a small sleeping bag, and several photos of Leo taken while he was sleeping. But the intruder was gone. They had escaped through a small ventilation hatch in the attic that Leo hadn't even known existed. The most disturbing part came a week later. Leo was staying at a hotel, packing his things to move out of the state for good. He decided to listen to the recordings on the device the police had let him keep as evidence. Most of the files were just snippets of him talking on the phone or muttering to himself. But the very last recording wasn't of Leo. It was a recording of the intruder, speaking in their own gravelly, natural voice, whispered directly into the microphone just moments before the police arrived. The voice said, "Thank you for the keys, Leo. I'll see you at the new place." Leo realized then that his house keys were still missing from the nightstand. The intruder hadn't just been living in his house, they had been planning their next move. To this day, Leo never enters a room without checking the locks, and he never, ever sleeps without the lights on, because he knows that somewhere out there, someone is practicing his voice, waiting for the right moment to use it again.